LCAF. So, okay, this was our kind of kickoff. So let me actually take this moment now to welcome you all. I'm Margaret Watt. I'm the Director of Prevention at Positive Directions, the Center for Prevention and Counseling. We're located in Westport, and we work with prevention. We work on substance use prevention, mental health promotion in Fairfield, Westport, and Norwalk. And there are people from our Fairfield, Westport, and Norwalk coalitions here. You'll hear a little more about those, and we'd invite anyone interested to join those groups, because substance use prevention is something you do in your community with your community members to make your place a safer community, especially for kids. So we're so delighted today to have Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That's Nicole and Brooke, who are going to do their half-hour presentation for you. And afterwards, you will actually receive links to parent handbooks that are really fantastic. I very much encourage you to go through those handbooks. They're online. You can get hard copies as well. There's a middle school and a high school version with just loads of information and resources. So we're trying to keep this short and sweet, because we know we're all on Zoom all day, every day, and we appreciate your taking your time today for a presentation. As much Q&A as we need time for afterwards. We'll be here until noon or so. And so now what we can do is, okay, I'm just seeing a couple more people coming in. Welcome to those who have joined us. Please just introduce yourself in the chat, what town you're from, and how old your kids are. And let me close the poll. And are you all seeing the results?
Yes.
Okay. So this was to kind of get the juices flowing, right? To make us think about where, this presentation is largely focused on alcohol. In our prevention work, we work on other substances as well. The resources you'll hear today, some of these ideas are relevant to any substance that your young people may be using. But focusing on alcohol, what it looks like here is all of us in our own lives, when we were growing up, we saw alcohol used, 3/4 of us saw it used for special occasions. So just think about that. Special occasions, that is typical, right? I know we do that in my family, and we always did. The converse side of that is, do your kids ever, is there ever a message that you can have a special occasion without alcohol, right? That's another way of looking at it. Do special occasions require alcohol? 1/3 of us saw alcohol used as part of daily life. For example, a drink with dinner. And so again, just about 1 in 10 said we did see alcohol as a necessary part of all social gatherings. These are just good things to reflect on as a parent today. What are the messages you're sending to your kids? And 1 in 10 had a family that did not use alcohol. Also, looking down at how your kids see alcohol used in your family, again, 1 in 10 don't use alcohol. May or may not be the same people, right? And really similar results in terms of 3/4 of us using alcohol for special occasions. But notice the difference. About 1/3 of us grew up with alcohol as part of daily life, and over half of us say that our kids seeing alcohol being used daily in our lives. I can't know this for sure, but there's a pretty good chance that if we'd asked you this question before the pandemic, that number may have been different. Because what we do know is that alcohol use is up during the pandemic. People are using more people are using more, and they're even day drinking. So there's increasing numbers of people going into treatment for alcohol. And so all of that is why it's so relevant to be talking about this at this time. So that was our introduction. I am going to turn it over to Nicole Wachowski and Brooke Maxfield from Drunk Driving.
Hi, thank you for having us here, and we're happy to have you all. And we know that time is precious as parents, so we do want to get you as much information as possible in kind of a nice, condensed, and quick way. And then we really encourage you to afterwards go through those handbooks that we'll describe later. It has so much more detail in there. So taking some time to do that afterwards, and always reaching out to any of us, either through MADD or with any of the coalitions with any questions you might have. So I'm Nicole Wachowski. I'm the program manager here for our youth department at MADD in Connecticut, and Brooke is our program specialist. We're both going to be presenting today, and then we'll be around for the discussion part as well. So let's just jump right in. So at MADD, we always start all of our programs with what we call a mission moment. And it's really stories about why we do what we do. Real life stories from teens who have been impacted either by drunk driving, impaired driving, like drugged driving, or underage drinking. So we're going to share the stories today of Casey and Olivia. I'm going to read the story of Casey as told by his mother. Casey, my eldest, was what you would call a good kid, on the honor roll, in marching band and choir. He also wrestled and played football. Casey's father had a drinking problem, and Casey knew it contributed to our divorce. That gave me a false sense of security. I believed he had seen the problems of alcohol could cause firsthand and was mature enough to handle drinking, but I was wrong. Casey was 18 the night he and his friend stopped at a drive-up liquor establishment that didn't card underage buyers. They bought rum and decided it would be fun to see just how much one person could chug. That person was Casey. Around noon the next day, the police officer came to my door to tell me Casey was dead. It took 2 days for the coroner to confirm that Casey's blood alcohol content was 0.41, more than 5 times the drunk driving limit for an adult. If I had it all to do over again, I would have made my message very clear. When I found that bottle of rum Casey had hidden in my garage, I would not have thrown it away and said nothing like I did. I would have taken it out and set it on my kitchen counter. Then we would have had a discussion why I did not want him drinking. I would have spoken to him about alcohol more often. And Brooke is now going to share the story of Olivia.
This is the story of Olivia from her mother's point of view. My daughter Olivia didn't wake up one day desiring to be an alcoholic and addict and lose her life at 21. That came about from the friends and choices she made. Olivia took her first drink around age 13. Looking back, there were signs. Her friends changed in middle school. Her diaries talk about how badly she wanted to fit in. I once dropped her off at a friend's house, and when I returned, she was so intoxicated with alcohol poisoning that we went straight to the emergency.
Yeah.
Drinking caused Olivia to lose her virginity just before the 8th grade to a high school senior. Then she was so ashamed she drank and tried to
Like it for an hour.
She just couldn't stop. Olivia was a repeat offender. She got arrested, did drugs, wrecked a car, and became involved in an abusive relationship. Despite all the bad things, she still graduated early from high school with wonderful grades. When she wasn't under the influence, she was sweet and charming and funny. At age 21, Olivia called and asked for help. We got her waitlisted at an inpatient treatment program. She was supposed to call daily to check for an opening. But Olivia stopped calling, thinking she could handle it herself. 3 months later, she drove drunk, hit an embankment, and died the next day. Later, I learned that the parents of one of Olivia's closest middle school friends allowed kids to drink at home as long as no one was driving. I had no idea. I trusted other parents and put my head in the sand. I never wanted to believe that my daughter had a drinking problem or was less than perfect. Losing Olivia changed our family forever. The simplest things you take for granted become a monumental event, like setting the table, just holding that extra plate in your hand. I share her story because if one person chooses not to go down that path, then Olivia's life and death have purpose, and that gives me comfort.
So here at MADD, as part of our mission, we really believe in no more victims. We don't want to see anyone else impacted by underage drinking or drunk driving. So we have 4 parts to our mission, which is to end drunk driving, to help fight drugged driving, as we know that it's more common these days, between marijuana being legal in some states, even though it's not legal to drive, between medical marijuana and the opioid epidemic. All of those things have led to more drugged drivers on the road. And then a really important piece of what we do is preventing underage drinking, which is really why we're here today. And there's really 2 reasons why we want to do that. One, we know that the earlier someone starts drinking, the more likely they are to develop a problem use disorder later in life, a substance use disorder. Someone who's 13 at the age when they start drinking is about has about a 45% chance of developing an alcohol disorder later in life, as opposed to somebody who waits till 21. It reduces that risk to about 9%. So we know it can happen either way, or it might not happen either way. There are certainly other factors that come into play as well, but we know that the earlier we start educating, we hope that we can reduce that number. And of course, substance use disorders are also linked to drunk driving later in life. So by preventing underage drinking, we are in essence helping with drunk driving. The other reason why we really want to talk to parents and teens about underage drinking is we know that every year over 4,300 teens, people under 21, die from underage drinking. So not only are we trying to prevent drunk driving in the future, but also these deaths that are currently happening. And then the last part of our mission is, as long as there is a victim out there, we will be there to support them. So we have a victim services team that is always available free of charge to support any victims and family members, whether it's going to court with them or providing emotional support. So if anyone ever finds themselves being a victim or knows a victim, please have them reach out to us. So we have two programs here at MADD, and today you're witnessing the Power of Parents program. We also have our Power of Youth program. The messages are pretty similar in both programs. Obviously, the Power of Parents is geared more towards parents. And really, it's about empowering you to know that you actually do make a difference. The things that you say to your children, they really are listening. So we want you to have the information on why underage drinking is so dangerous and how you can talk to your kids. And our Power of Youth program focuses on a lot of educational-based information about underage drinking, as well as some personal real-life stories. And we do that in schools and community centers, really anywhere where kids gather. So if anyone is ever interested in bringing that program to their school or community center, you can always reach out to Brooke or I. Okay, so today what we're going to talk about, we're going to first talk about the problem and consequences of underage drinking and marijuana use. We're then going to go into the role that teens, friends, and peers have, the role that adults in general have, and the role that you have as parents. And then we'll talk about what you can do today, tomorrow, and in the future to help keep your kids safe. We'll say this multiple times throughout the program, but we do want you to remember that you do have the power to make the difference. Your kids are listening to what you say. So we'll talk a little bit about the problem in general. So I'm sure it's not shocking to you that alcohol is the #1 drug of choice for youth. While a lot of parents maybe might focus on other drugs as being an issue, alcohol is the one that teens are using the most. So sometimes parents tend to gloss over that and kind of focus on other things, but we really need to talk to our kids about alcohol use. As I said before, it kills more than 4,300 youth every year. And the reason why it's important to wait until 21 is that our human brain is not fully developed yet until our mid-20s. The last part of our brain to develop is the part of our brain that deals with good decision-making, logic, and reasoning skills. So because that part of the brain is not fully developed to begin with, drinking underage can impact that part of the brain from developing the way it should. It could wire the brain for addiction. And also, if someone's drinking underage, we know that alcohol already lowers our decision-making skills to begin with, even as adults. So if that part of the brain isn't kind of built up yet, and they add a substance onto it, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. That's why a lot of kids make really poor choices under the influence. We also want you to remember that it's never too early to start talking to your kids. If we have people on the call that have younger children, I know there was somebody who had even a 5-year-old. Kids start weighing the pros and cons of drinking alcohol at age 8. And really a lot of that information comes from what they hear in the home. So it's really never too early to start talking to your kids. So I'm going to talk about the local statistics as in Connecticut, and then I think, Margaret, is this where you want to jump in afterwards with some of the even more local? Okay. In a study from 2017 and 18, on a national level, 19.3% of 12 to 20-year-olds said that they had consumed alcohol in the month leading up to the survey. And here in Connecticut, we came out above that average at 26.2%. The Set the Rules CT self-reporting of students found that 70% of 8th graders have said that it's very easy or fairly easy to obtain alcohol. Again, these are 8th graders, and that alcohol might even be something that they've tried to obtain in their home. The 2019 Connecticut High School Youth Risk Behavior Survey reported that 11.7% of high school students had consumed alcohol more than just a few sips before the age of 13. So remember, before we talked about 13 as being an important number. So 11.7% of high school students reported that here in Connecticut. And 12.9% had said that they had binge drank in the last 30 days. That means 4 drinks for females or 5 drinks for males, kind of in one sitting or in a few hour period. So that's what's going on here in Connecticut. And Margaret's going to talk a little bit more specifically in Fairfield County.
Yeah, so because we work in Westport, Fairfield, and Norwalk, we wanted to share just like a brief statistic or two from each town. I'm going to let Rainey Noor share first from Fairfield. She and Kathy Hazlett, who's also on the call, Kathy's the coordinator. Rainey does all the social media and programming for the Fairfield Cares Community Coalition.
And so don't, I'm going to drop your share screen and share my screen for a second. So don't be
Okay.
concerned when that happens.
No problem.
So I hope this flipped for everybody. This is from our Mention Prevention Initiative, which kind of, Kathy really nicely condensed some of our statistics here in Fairfield that showed our merchants the need to participate in this initiative. And it's another story. So what we saw in our last survey that was done in 2019 is that, 12th graders used alcohol once or more in the past 30 days. It was 51% of all of our 12th graders. And you can see, the younger they are, the less that happens. And what we're also very concerned with is the perception of harm, which is they do not think there's much risk in having 5 or more drinks in one setting, which is binge drinking. And in our 12th graders and 11th graders, it's almost a quarter. And then if you go a little further down and it's, you read through, if you ever drank alcohol more than a sip, where did you get it? And the answer of my house with my parents' permission, that's a really scary idea. And so that's where we feel our parental education needs to come in. And what's really good, though, is that we have really been able to make a dent in the percentage of youth who drank in the past 30 days from 2005, when it was 41%, to 2019, when it was 21, which that's the average from 7th to 12th grade. That doesn't mean that it's something we can rest our laurels on, but we still have to continue working on it. And especially when we have adults saying, well, what does it mean? Look, I turned out fine. And the next thing you know, they get behind the wheel after they've been drinking. So how fine is that? So I'm leaving it there. And that Westport share their data.
Great. And Kevin's going to talk from Westport, but you're muted, Kevin.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Westport, we're hoping to survey youth this year. We're up. This is the next year in our survey cycle, but I'll talk a little bit about Westport participated in a youth and parent focus group that was done back in December through UConn, looking at substance use and mental health, mainly during this COVID time. But I'll talk a little bit about the alcohol findings as they're relevant to this program. Reported back from youth, what we heard was that prior to COVID, a lot of the drinking was done at parties. Once COVID happened, there were few parties, less substance use. They said there was increased drinking in the spring. Students were coping with the shutdown. And an interesting quote from one of the students, when the quarantine first started, there was a lot of drinking over FaceTime, but that's waned quite a bit. Is now they feel like people don't want to deal with it the next day if they're not going to a big social event. So again, going back to the parties being a big driver of that. In general, and we have seen this traditionally over the years, as there's a spike, and I think the data that Ryan just shared with Fairfield showed it as well. We usually see a spike in use from that 10th grade to 11th grade transition. So, drinking with the older high school students is a little bit more prevalent. In terms of access, older siblings and friends, some kids get it at home without parent knowledge. And we know that there are some parents that are okay with it, that accept it as a rite of passage, that feel like it's safer if they know it's happening and do it at home. That's been a discussion in our prevention coalition this year about what we can do to empower the parents that don't want to allow it and want to promote healthier lifestyles. And also to educate the community a little bit more on the social hosting laws and the risks and consequences with allowing youth drinking in the home. And interestingly enough, talking about the COVID time, there was a comment from one of the students as part of that focus group saying that masks do make it easier to purchase in stores because they're not getting carded as much. The norms, like I said, that are there's a pretty wide range. Some parents are accepting of it, others aren't. The students did say that they are noticing it more amongst parents during COVID. So, we talk a lot about modeling and just being, aware and alert about what our kids are seeing and, what kind of behavior we're modeling for them. So that's kind of an overview of what we heard from the focus groups. I'll also in the chat, I'll share a resource. So our department, Human Services, we contract with a licensed drug and alcohol counselor at Staples High School. And I'll share her contact in the chat as well, because I think that's a relatively new program as part of our student outreach contracts with the schools. So happy to get her information out as much as possible.
Thanks, Kevin. And I'm just going to share. Diamond is on the phone, but you can't see her. Diamond and I co-coordinate the Norwalk Prevention Council, which is called the Norwalk Partnership. I mean, I actually work with all these communities, but I'm a Norwalk resident. So I'm sharing my screen. Are you seeing it? Yep. This is an infographic based on the last survey we did in Norwalk of youth, which was 2018. And we are also surveying again, target of the first week of April. But this is, just to show you that part of what prevention coalitions do is gather data, because when we see what the issue is in our town, we know what we need to focus on, right? So one thing that we saw needed to be focused on in Norwalk last time was, for example, here was the state data in 2019. 1 in 3 11th graders was drinking statewide, but in Norwalk, it was 40% compared to 30%. We also had a quarter of Norwalk students reporting that they had ridden with an impaired driver in the last year. They weren't doing the driving, but they were willing to get in a car, right? So I think there's messaging for parents out there, I will pick you up, take an Uber, do not get in that car with that impaired driver. Again, there we saw differences, not between boy and girl drinking, but differences in what substances kids were using based on sort of their racial background, racial ethnic background. And about a quarter of kids, any given year, like with each year the kids get older, they may have an increased likelihood of using any substance. So looking at juniors, we had a quarter of them who had binge drunk in the past 2 weeks. And binge drinking, as you can see, is associated with impaired driving, having sex or unprotected sex or sexual assault, dating violence, suicide attempt, and drug use. So just a couple statistics to share. This is on the Norwalk Partnership website, and on the back there are other resources. So I'm going to stop sharing because we want to get back to MADD. We decided after the first time we did this presentation that we would insert a little bit of your local data to get your interest out there, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end.
Okay, Brooke, can you pop back up our screen? Okay, Brooke, can you also just show me, can you pop forward? Can you show me what comes up after this one? Because I just want to know if that's where we switch. Yes, okay. So I'll talk a little bit. I didn't know if we had the social host slides, so I'll just quickly talk about social host in here too. Cool. So when we talked before about 4,300 deaths occur every year related to underage drinking, a lot of you might have been thinking that a lot of those deaths happen from drunk driving. And it actually is only 1/3 of those deaths are from traffic related underage drinking. So there are 2/3 unrelated. It's homicides, suicides, poisonings, alcohol poisonings, drownings, fires, and falls. So one of the things we really want to impress upon parents is that you can't have that mentality of taking away the keys takes away the risk. We hear parents say all the time, kids are going to get dropped off at my house, or if they drive here, I'm going to take away their keys and everything will be fine. And you're really only taking away that 1/3 of the risk. There are so many other things that could happen. And that's why the social host law is here in Connecticut and taken pretty seriously. The social host law says that if you have if your child has a party in your home, you are responsible. Doesn't matter if you were the one who supplied the alcohol or not, if you were aware of the party, if you were home at the time of the party, you can't just use the excuse, I didn't know, or I didn't know what was going on in my basement. There are some fines that come along with it, also depending up to $2,000. Depending on what happens as a result of the party, certainly if someone gets injured or killed as a result of the party, you can face jail time, you can have a felony on your record. So there are some really steep charges that go along with it, and as it should be taken very seriously, because we know that this is where a lot of those underage drinking deaths occur. I'm going to pass it over to Brooke now, and she's going to pick up with some of the roles of peers and adults and parents.
Great, thank you. So the role of friends and peers in your teen's life. Middle schoolers and high schoolers, they tend to overestimate how many teens are actually drinking. They think everybody's doing it when actually not everybody's doing it. We have a statistic that only about 1 in 8, 1 in 7 students, teens are binge drinking. However, and I think we'll hear on the next slide too, that 1 in 100 parents thinks their teens binge drinks. So there really is a huge gap on one side thinks everybody's doing it and one side thinks nobody's doing it. And really, the role of friends and peers in a teen's choice to drink is the societal pressure, and parents really need to worry less about like if their kids are hanging out with the bad kids or the good kids, and more just showing them that it's not true that everybody's drinking. It's only about 1 in 8 people. So if they have a whole friend group that's 8 people, it's only one of them is really doing it. And they're frequently wrong about how much alcohol is consumed by their friends too. And so all those misperceptions lead to those kids who do end up drinking. And because they feel the pressure to fit in, be like other kids that are their age, and that they just think it's normal and that it's okay to do. So as parents, just realizing and showing your teens that really not everybody's doing it, and that there are alternatives to what you can do when you hang out with your friends. So the role of adults, and this is more specific, not really parents fit in as adults, but this is really any adults. So your friends or your kids' friends, parents, or any other kind of adult in their life. They also have their own misperceptions about alcohol that we've kind of touched on. Letting teens drink at home takes away the mystery of alcohol and decreases the desire to drink. That it's okay for special occasions and holidays. That kind of goes back to the poll that we did in the beginning, right? On how the special occasions is really one of the main things that kind of is the exception to the rule. And they, as adults, drink underage, or the age was lower than it was 18 and it wasn't 21, or used marijuana as a teen, and then they turned out okay. So it's fine if their kids do too. When we know so much more now, and decades of research have actually shown that when children are or teens are allowed to drink in the home, they drink in even more amounts outside of the home. So they drink more often, and then they have more problems. So you really can't teach your teen or your child how to drink responsibly. There is no other drug, painkillers, heroin, anything else that you are going to bring into your home and teach your child how to use. So why would you teach your child how to use alcohol? So with that, we're going to go back to Nicole and talk about what really parents can do and kind of the impact specifically parents have on their teens.
So I'm going to just give a little bit of COVID update research, but then this is just about setting an example as a whole, because really, even once COVID's gone, we know as parents, there are a lot of things that cause stress in our lives. So really just in any kind of stressful situation, I think it's important to think about the example that you're setting. But recent research showed that, and this is kind of research from the early summer, so not super recent. I think this might have changed a little bit. This was kind of when people were really social distancing and not wanting to meet up with anyone. But it showed that since social distancing began, the number of teens who drank and used marijuana decreased, but the frequency of use increased, meaning less teens were doing it, but the ones that were we're doing it at higher rates, and a lot of times to cope with stress or for boredom as well. So as adults, it's really important, as Kevin was saying before, to set an example of what's going on in these stressful times and what's going on in your house. So I think we probably all have seen hundreds of memes about alcohol and parenting when COVID first happened. And people might think that's funny. And if your kids have access to your social media page, even if it's on Facebook and your kids have a Facebook page, if they see you posting those kinds of things, it's pretty much saying, yeah, I drink to get through the day, and that's perfectly fine. So even though it might just be funny in your mind, and maybe you don't have a problem with alcohol, so it's not seen as a big deal, think about how your kids are viewing that. And also about the things that you're saying. So, if you're saying something along the lines of, oh, this day has been so stressful, I just can't wait to unwind with wine later in the day, or I really need to meet up with my my friends or coworkers at the end of the day and have a few beers. Showing that stress is then wanting you to drink is putting that as idea in their head that that's how we cope with stress. We use alcohol to cope with stress. So just like we don't want to highlight that, we do want to highlight the positive alcohol and drug-free ways we are coping with stress. So if you like to run, saying to your kids, I had a hard day today at work and I'm going to go for a run. Do you want to come with me? It's a really great way to de-stress. So really thinking about the things that we're doing that are positive, or, do you want to come do some cooking with me? I love to cook. It always de-stresses me. Whatever it is that you're doing, instead of just doing it, actually say the words so that it's starting to get it in their head that, okay, these are ways that we can cope with stress. Next slide. So what else can you do? Well, as I've been saying since the beginning, right, you have the power to make the difference. And this is the stat that shows you this. 3 in 4 teens say their parents are the leading influence on their decision to drink alcohol or not. So meaning that they're either way, whether they decide to drink it or they don't drink it. 3 out of 14, 75%. So they really are listening to what you say. You may feel like they're not listening, but it is sinking in. So we want you to have those conversations. Brooke and I always say, talk now and talk often. So it's not a conversation, it's multiple conversations. It's check-ins. It's, something that you maybe a few times over the course of the semester you're talking to them about, or after special events or occasions, or maybe something came up with one of their friends or their friend got in trouble and you're checking in with them on things. So having those conversations often. The handbooks that you guys are going to get the links to, we have a few different versions. So we have a middle school version, a high school version, and then we also have it available in Spanish. The Spanish one is just a combination of the two together. And there aren't many big differences in the middle school and high school one. It's really just a little bit more about kind of a section on what their world is like at that age. So middle schoolers, it's a little different than obviously high schoolers. If you have both, you know the differences. So that's how the handbooks differ a little bit. So they're going to be available virtually, but you can always get hard copies from us as well. Or if you work in any kind of community area that you think would want them, we put them out in libraries, community centers, nonprofits. You can always contact Brooke and I, and we can get them out to you free of charge as well. And this is just kind of a quick overview of what's in those handbooks. Like I said, I really encourage you all to read them on your own. There's so much information in there, but it talks a little bit about your high school or middle schooler's world. It talks about parenting style. So it talks about the 4 main types of parenting style. And it's not really to critique you as a parent or to say what you should or shouldn't do, but it just talks about kind of research-based what has been most effective when communicating with teens, especially related to marijuana use and alcohol. Then how to talk about alcohol, how to help your teens make good choices. There is a new section now that we added into these new handbooks that talks about marijuana use and how marijuana has changed in the past 30 years. It's not the same marijuana that was around back in the day, and it actually is very addictive. It has a lot more THC in it than it used to. So this is important to get out to parents, because parents sometimes still have, parents and even grandparents still have that image in their head of what marijuana is, and it's so different now, and your kids can become addicted to it. So that's kind of all that's in the handbooks. And again, we just want to encourage you to have those teens. Remember that your teens are listening, and really think about what you are saying to them. And with that, we're going to wrap up the formal part of the presentation and now move on to kind of the discussion and questions and answers.
Nicole and Brooke, thank you so much. That was really great. And for those who are seeing all this, you just noticed that in the chat, there's already been some resource sharing and some There was a question about whether Safe Rides was still out there. And it used to be in all our towns, and it really isn't anymore, but we have Wheels to You that started in Norwalk and I think is now also in Westport. But let's see what questions you guys have.
First of all, thank you. Super. I'm going to print some of the flyers here. Super handy information. I have a question when, I understand the importance of the messaging, but what about when parents are very different? I don't drink and my husband, drinks socially, but I don't. And messages, as you were talking, there's some things that I don't do at all, but I can see my husband doing something. So when, as a kid, when you find yourself in that middle, I find it difficult, but, any advice or guidance there would be appreciated.
I think you have an open conversation about that with them, and you go, what have you noticed? Have you noticed that we have something sort of similar in my own family, Mercedes, and my kids at one point said, oh, we noticed that you do this and dad does that. And then we just talked about it. And I think, but that's probably the most helpful thing that I can say is don't let, her live in this sort of cognitive dissonance of like, how do I interpret this? Let it be an opportunity for, this is what I like to do instead, or this is my, without judgment necessarily, but saying, this is why I choose to do this. What do you think? What have you noticed? Really empower your daughter to express what she's noticed, what her thoughts about it are, what her questions about it are. And maybe if you think it's going to be contentious, then I think it would be a discussion between the parents. There's probably a lot of us here who have different views. So it's a good opportunity to talk about it among the parents first, and then a conversation with the kids.
Great, thank you.
Kim Carone, I see you have your hand.
I have a question for Kevin. You mentioned that you were working in Westport on how to empower parents who don't allow drinking in their homes. So I was wondering what it is that you've done or what suggestions you would have.
Sure, thank you. So that's something that came up very early in our Prevention Coalition meetings this year as one of the initiatives that we wanted to tackle. So in our discussions, we've talked a lot about what we can do in terms of educating parents and getting materials, resources out there, around social hosting, what the laws are, what the healthy alternatives are, and to offer programs like this, encouraging that communication and talking with kids, and also a lot about social norming and how we can, raise up and, promote a little bit more what those healthy options are, both from parents who are making them and also from kids who are choosing, other things to do other than you use alcohol or substances. Margaret, did you want to add anything on that just from those conversations?
I think, actually Kevin Kim is one of the people, and Katie here, who recently kind of thought about joining us. And I think, now is a great time. We're still working on those plans, Kim. So, join us so we can figure out the best way to do it. As you guys were hearing this presentation, I figure probably everyone at some point in there is thinking, oh, I didn't ever think of that, or I have never said this, or I've never noticed that. What's something that really drew your attention and you're wondering how to go back and do it now?
I think what really draws my attention is the slide about that it's not just car crashes that are causes of death. It's so much more. And taking away the key does not take away the risk or risks. And from talking to parents, I've got kids between the ages of 23 and 17. So I have many years of talking to parents, and Also seeing parents' reaction when there was something. Let's say there was a party somewhere that was busted, and some parents go, oh, well, kids will be kids, and others will be genuinely concerned. And I go, oh my gosh, I've got to really keep an eye on the parents that are like, oh, kids will be kids, because those will be the ones that hosted their house next. So, and having that conversation with my kids and going through, let's say when I see something in the newspaper and let's say, oh, would this have happened if this person hadn't been drinking? And so we try and have conversations that don't necessarily involve them at the moment, but illustrate something that could involve them if they were to make a decision to drink. So like you said earlier, it's not a one-time conversation, it's little conversations over a long time.
And here's a question for you guys, because we should all be having these conversations, regularly, and we may or we may not, right? Or we may think I started too late. We may think my kid's already out there drinking or using. But here we are in a pandemic. They are much less social than they used to be. I think, my personal feeling is that by the time the school year is ending, they are going to be out a lot more social. The weather will be better and will permit it. The virus seems to be, knock on wood, going in the right direction. And I think kids are going to want to go nuts, right? They're going to burst out of their cage and want to socialize. And if they are a teen, and by teen, I mean middle school or high school, they may be in situations where there is alcohol, there are vapes, there is marijuana. We know those things are commonly available, even though, as you saw in the data, it's generally, even by the time they're a junior or senior, they are, depending what town you're in, maybe half the kids are using, but usually it's still more, the majority are still not, even by senior year, but they all think everyone's doing it, like we said. So what have you been doing to start talking to your kids, or have you thought about it yet? I mean, this is a genuine question. Me too, right? I want to be talking to my kids about when you get back out there, when you're in that situation, what are you going to say? How are you going to refuse? What's your alternative plan? How are you going to have fun, but not, I think I said it before, I'm like, hashtag don't be a dumbass. That's my like basic message to them. So what have you guys been thinking about that?
Katie has her hands up, so interesting.
Can't hear you, Rainey.
Katie has her hands up. I'm interested to hear what she has to say.
Oh, there. Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Well, I think this, kind of can contribute to what you're asking. So I'm in Westport, and I have two sons that are a senior and a sophomore, and I have a daughter that's in 7th grade. And I'm an advisor for Brooks, my 7th graders, National Charity League, her group of 23 girls. So I'm going to look through that handbook some and see what ways I can, get the conversation going with the other advisors and the moms with the daughters. And I know that the health classes, I love the way health classes in the school district seem to begin with talking about the positivity, self-esteem, before they even really get into don't take drugs. They talk about being comfortable in your own skin. So the Charity League, they do a lot of encouraging the girls to have their voice, and be comfortable speaking up and leading. So when they go to a social environment, after COVID, and they get in these situations where they need to say no, I think having that backbone developed and try it out, like simulate at home, what are you going to say, when you're out in that environment, is very helpful. But I wanted to ask, with Uber, how has that increased or decreased problems related to drinking and drinking and driving, I guess? How has Uber helped, or has it made people too comfortable drinking? I wanted to hear your thoughts.
I know Katie, Melissa McGarry is another mom from Westport who works with us a lot. And she's commented, and she has kids at various ages, and she's commented that drunk driving, impaired driving, there's such awareness among kids and parents in Westport around that it's not an issue. It shouldn't be the issue that we're focusing on. Like they know they can call Uber. And in fact, when parents are hosting parties for their kids, they're saying, tell your friends not to drive and don't park here, because they also don't want it to be visible that they're having a teen party. So everybody just gets dropped off and there's no cars and no one knows what's happening in the house. So I think really that, and I'm going to actually pivot over to Lieutenant Orr, because he might be able to talk from police perspective about what we see with impaired driving. But I think probably the bigger issue is, when kids are behind closed doors, alone or with people, what are they doing? And the whole binge drinking thing is so dangerous. I mean, you can literally, I talked to a girl a couple of years ago who was 16, and she was like this tiny little 5'2" kid from Wilton. And she was like, oh, this weekend I was really, she had like 6 drinks in the first half hour. She was just chugging when she got to a party. And increasingly before COVID, you would hear kids like, the point of getting to a party in many cases had become get drunk, get stoned right away, right? Like start the party. That's how you start. So that's really just dangerous. So those are some of the things in my mind that we need to let kids know. Lieutenant Orr, any thoughts?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. So procuring alcohol to a minor is a felony, number one. We unfortunately have to make that arrest a few times a year here. As far as possession of alcohol by a minor goes, we really try and make that the last resort. And as far as arresting kids for that alone, whenever we do arrest kids for that, it's usually because they possessed alcohol while committing some other type of offense, and their use of the alcohol contributed to their participation in some other type of behavior. So I mean, that's really it with the alcohol stuff. Regarding parties, I did actually attend a training a few years ago that was really interesting. I didn't know what to expect from it, but it was a 1-day training, an 8-hour training put on, and it was called Party Dispersal Techniques. And so it really focused on how to disperse parties where there is underage drinking happening in a way that doesn't further endanger the participants or the attendees of the parties. So we all remember our high school days back when the cops would show up and everyone ran out the back door and to their car and took off. That obviously is extremely dangerous. So nowadays, when we get wind of an underage drinking party, we try and block the cars in first so kids can't leave, and then let the kids know right from the beginning that it is not our intent to arrest anybody, that the number one priority is to make sure that the kids get home safely. And we try and just take it from 100 down to 30, and let everybody gather their things, make phone calls, and get out of there safely, rather than take a hard-nosed enforcement angle on it where it makes kids run and get into other dangerous situations.
Thank you for that. And
Mind
that's,
if
Kevin, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in just in regards to the question, to Katie's question about Uber. The impression that I have is that in some ways it's kind of reduced that perception of harm. I think it's made parties and everything a little bit more accessible to kids. I think while they may not realize the impact of drinking itself, I think everybody recognizes the risk of drinking and driving. So now you're taking that driving piece out of the equation with Uber. So I think more kids are utilizing those services. And I'll make a plug. I love what you said about the positivity and self-esteem. There's an organization that's based out of New Canaan that we've done a lot of work with If anybody has daughters, has girls, the Live Girl, they do some great programs. I'll put their information in the chat, but they do a lot about women's empowerment, and they've really expanded across not only Fairfield County, but now other parts of the state as well.
And just to piggyback on that, what you mentioned, Katie, about self-esteem and all that goes back to that very first, Olivia's story that we opened the training with, right? It's mental health is so connected to substance use. If you don't feel good in your skin, if you're stressed, you're looking for ways to cope. If you don't have positive coping techniques, you cope however you can. And that's where alcohol and drugs come in and are so detrimental. And so we want to make sure people are in good mental shape, and that they have supports and that they have resources and they know coping skills and they know where to reach out. And there are so many, so this is my plug for, there are so many crisis lines, warm lines, treatments and supports around. What I'm about to do is throw in the chat two things. One is just a link to the hub, where I actually worked until recently, and that's the Regional Behavioral Health Action Organization. So they have a list of both all the different mental health and substance services by age in the region, as well as a variety of support groups for individuals who are struggling and for the family members of those who are struggling. So there's tons of options. And if it's in the resource guide, then they accept all kinds of insurance and all of that. The other thing that I'm about to put in the chat as well is our evaluation, which is just a super quick online Google form that we would invite you to fill out, because I know some people are probably going to jump in like a minute. And if in the meantime, if you want to stay on for a couple more questions, we probably can. You will get a link to the parent handbooks from MADD. And Diana, you've got a question and you applauded, so that's great. Hi, Diana.
Hi, I'm just trying to find a quote that I heard last night. Lisa Demore was speaking, if that's her name, and I can't quite find it, but her definition of mental health was having the appropriate emotion at the appropriate time and tolerating the difficult ones.
Nice. Great. And so that's actually great, because you could have a problem at each point in that, right? You might not have the tolerance, or you might not have the right emotion, or you might not have it at the right time. So like that's actionable. Let's work on those strategies.
Yeah, it gave me something very specific to focus on, like you said.
I have a question for Lieutenant Orr, because this is kind of an anecdotal gut feel that I have. But I also have heard kids say that they wouldn't dream of driving after drinking, but they find themselves in the car with an adult that has been drinking quite regularly. And oftentimes it's their parents after going out for dinner. And the parents have 2-3 drinks and then drive the family home. And I do feel MADD has done a phenomenal job with this most recent generation. And I do feel they have it internalized. I don't drink and drive. But people my age, late 40s, early 50s, they still think they've got it all under control. And it's for them, nobody else, but for them, it's totally fine to drive after a few drinks. And that's my anecdotal perception. Lieutenant Orr, how do you feel that? Is that based in truth, or is that just my fantasy?
That's a great observation. Research has shown that the most dangerous intoxicated driving is the type where the operator merely has a buzz and is not yet fully aware of how intoxicated they are, and their reflexes and judgment are impaired, but they're not really aware of it. Like inebriated driving is, believe it or not as dangerous, because people who are inebriated are usually very aware of how intoxicated they are and are going really slow and trying to be really careful. It's the buzz driving that is like the 0.08 to 0.12 range that is the most dangerous. So it's a good thing the kids are aware of the dangers of what happens to their parents when they've gone out to dinner and had 2 or 3 drinks, and that may have put them over the limit and within that danger range. But there's also the potential that they're not 0.08. So I mean, they're saying about for an adult male, it's 1 to 2 drinks per hour will keep you below the 0.08 range. But if a child feels as though their parent is too intoxicated to drive home from the restaurant, I don't think I've had it yet happen in my 21 years where we've had a child call the police because they don't feel comfortable getting in the car with their parent. And I'll be honest with you, most of our drunk driving accidents are not that. They're not, mom and dad coming home from the restaurant at 9:30 with a carload of kids. I mean, it really doesn't happen really ever. I mean, I understand the fear, but as far as realistic impact of it, most of our DWE accidents are between the hours of 11 and 3 a.m. on the midnight shift, right after the bars close, where people are just flying around and they wrap their car around a tree. So I understand that fear, but we really don't see much of that.
But you know what I'm thinking is, because I've seen that happen, and I think a health ed teacher that we work with in the public schools said she spends a lot of time with the students talking about, don't get in a car with a drunk driver and what are your strategies and whatever. And she sends messages home to parents saying, make sure that you have got a contract with the kids that, they will call you and they won't get in. And, how incredibly empowering is it if the kids can say to the parents after a dinner, hey, I noticed you had 2 drinks. So should we call an Uber? Should we get on that Wheels to You bus? And if either parent is like, yep, let's do it. I had 2 drinks and I might be buzzed at this point. If you follow the rules for yourself or your family, you're really showing that you're strict about it.
Or how about taking it one step further and having that be a contract between the parent and the student or the child that neither of them will breach. That can be a 2-way street. If the parents
right, anyone can call the other one out.
Yeah, it should be a 2-way street. That'd be good.
Totally. There are. Am I sharing my screen? Can you guys see the alcohol page from the Norwalk Partnership website? Somewhere on here is a link to a contract that parents can sign with teens. And I pulled this up because I wanted you to see, like, when you go to a restaurant and you get a glass of wine, it's not a 5-ounce glass of wine. The glasses are bigger. And if they filled your wine glass this much, you would complain. So it's so frequent that you do go out to drink and you're getting more than you expected. So if you're seeing this screen and you wanted to see what the blood alcohol content tables are, they're at the bottom of the screen. I can no longer exit the shared screen. So if someone would get me out of here, that'd be great. One of my co-hosts. Thank you. And somebody had their hand up and I see some questions in the chat. I do want to acknowledge that if you have to go, that's fine. But again, we'd really appreciate it if you would fill out the survey. I'm going to try to put it back in the chat, but it's just a little evaluation because we really want to know what you thought of this, how we can make it better, who else we could share it with, any of that. Oh, it's not letting me recopy it. Rainey, I'm having problems. Can you recopy the survey link for me? All right, Mercedes, I see you have to go. Thank you. Good to see you.
I just want to answer the question that says, does anyone have a contract that they've used? Brooke, we do have that contract on the Power of Parents page, right? Quote me if I'm wrong, though. I don't think it goes the opposite way, like Lieutenant Orr was just talking about, in kind of making the parents responsible too. Which is actually a great thing to bring up to, we have a meeting today about our Power of Parents program. And I kind of want to bring that up to see if maybe we can add something like that into our contract so that it is 2-sided and that parents are setting the right example.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
if someone can get me a copy of that, I'd like to distribute it to my SROs at the high school level and see if we could get some buy-in from the administrations at the high schools.
You know what, Lieutenant, or it's the teacher that I was talking about was Tori Sullivan, who's in our partnership meeting for Norwalk. She's the department chair for health and PE at McMahon. And so I think she actually has some kind of two-way version of a contract. So I will check in with her on that and send it to you.
Thanks.
Sure. But there are also, like, when you Google contracts with your kids for around, impaired driving, there's a bunch of them out there. I think the one that I put on the Norwalk Partnership website was just the one that I liked best. And I feel like it might have actually been from AAA, actually, I think. I saw some other questions.
There was a question about copycat, preventing kids from playing copycat with some of the drinking videos on social media. And I think I think we talked a little bit about social media and that influence at the last Prevention Coalition meeting. But I think whether it's YouTube or TikTok or anything, and some of the substance use that you see from these influencer videos, it's troubling. We know that's a lot of content that the kids are bringing in. I think it just goes back to really having those conversations, and as Margaret mentioned before, asking kids, what they think about, what's happening, and getting their feedback, their impression of what they're viewing, and educating with the realities of why that's dangerous, and what substances can do, and the short-term and long-term risks.
It's the problem we have with social media generally, right? There's always some like new dangerous challenge and you don't even know what they're looking at. And so I think just ongoing conversations around like, don't trust what you see, don't try it, ask me first. But then I do think with the actual binge drinking and stuff, just, having kids come up with their own strategies too, or share their strategies with each other. They listen to each other a lot on stuff like that. So there are, kids making videos for each other on, I go to the party, but my solo cup is full of beer. Well, if my solo cup is full of Coke, it's a solo cup. You can't see into it. It just, you don't have to feel like everyone's staring at you going, I'm the one who's not doing something, because they don't really care what you're doing. You're just there. So, and then a question about managing peer pressure. So I guess that's one example around the drinking, right? Around the drinking, it's, you can be there, maybe come with a buddy and have something else in your, if a kid really wants to go to a party and they feel like they're going to have a drink, can they bring in a bottle of something else that looks like it's, like whatever they need to do, whatever strategy, I think. I'm just trying to think, some of the kids, Randy, did Livy's group make some of these videos about alcohol, where it was the high school kids making videos with strategies for middle school kids?
They've made one video. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm waiting to get my eyes on it.
Yeah,
there is method
if I could jump in.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Kathy, I can't see your face, so I forgot.
Sorry, I've got other stuff going on, unfortunately. So I just thought it would be rude. So the kids, this was a wonderful exercise. Our group of high school teens developed a video for the 8th grade health classes. So those incoming freshmen next year, just to reinforce that most teens, in fact, are not drinking. Most teens are not using any sort of substance, but when you find yourself in a situation like a party situation, that solo cup, nobody knows, what's in it. And your friends, your real friends aren't going to really care. And that's, I think, an important message that these teens were trying to convey to the 8th graders. In addition to just surround yourself with positive people, be around people who have similar values as yourself. That's really important. And in the end, your real friends are not going to care whether you drink or not. And I just thought some of those responses was really mature and helpful for those incoming 8th graders.
You know, it really, when I think back about, it sucks to be a teen in so many ways, right? And like when you're a middle schooler, you're so self-conscious and you think everyone's staring at you and judging you and nobody cares. And sometimes I think it's genuinely saying to the kid, because it's so hard for them to take somebody else's perspective, right? It's all about like me, like what do they think of me? And if you just say to them, if you go to a party and Nicole's there and she's not drinking, what do you think about that? And they realize like they don't care that Nicole's not drinking. So why do you think everyone else cares that you're not drinking? Right? It's just, if you wouldn't judge them for that, if you wouldn't care, they probably just don't care what you're doing. So. Any other questions from anyone? You know what, why don't we I'm going to put my email in the chat. Actually, I guess you guys have it because I sent the link out, but if you're interested in more about the Fairfield group, you could contact Kathy or Riney, and they might want to put their emails in the chat. Kevin and I cover Westport, and he can put his email in the chat. And Diamond, I think, had to go, so she and I do Norwalk. Nicole and Brooke, did you put yours?
No, but we can.
Okay.
You're going to
So-
put the link for the MADD parent handbook in the chat?
We'll send that out to everyone afterwards as a group. I mean, we can, but what I'd like to do is get all the survey data. So it looks like 5 people have filled out the evaluation. I would love it if everyone else can as well. So any final comments, or, if not, have a great day and, hug your kids tonight and have a good conversation with them.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, everyone.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.